I believe to some extent you get what you put out into the world, and I've been putting out some pretty weird vibes. Over the past few years, I've accumulated quite an array of adult magazines from the 60s. The non-problem is, after looking at them once, you just kind of put them in a box, and then you put them in a closet, and you never look at them again. That's a waste because there's actually a lot to be said about them, so I'll do exactly that. In total, I plan on making 2 videos about these magazines covering 4 topics, 2 in each video. This video is about my American magazines, the evolution of Playboy and Playboy covers, and diving at least a bit into the brand and brand identity. The second part of the video is meant to provide a bit more context. What made Playboy popular in the first place? What made them different to other publications at the time? And why they are currently struggling. If you're wondering why I care and why I'm willing to make a long-ass video about this, I genuinely don't have a good answer. I don't care for Playboy. I find it has very few redeeming qualities, and I rather dislike Hugh Hefner as well. Here's the thing though, I need to do something, anything, to feel less guilty about what feels like watching my life pass me by in this godforsaken pandemic. I also did most of this research a few years ago for a project in university, so I'm really just trying to fill some of my free time. But how about me not wasting any more of your time and finally get into it? Playboy was founded in 1953 by Hugh Hefner, a name or at least a face you've probably heard of or seen before. Call me stupid, but I didn't know he was literally the Playboy. I thought he took the company over from his father or whatever white country club type men do, but no, he actually founded it himself. And he actually kind of hit the ground running with Marilyn Monroe being on the cover of the first issue, which obviously made a really good impression. Don't be fooled, however. The story behind this is actually quite awful. Because before Marilyn Monroe got famous, she had these photos taken when she was in desperate need of money. Then, after becoming famous, the asshole photographer sold these photos for a lot more than he paid her, and it was Hugh Hefner that bought these images and used them in the Playboy magazine, without Marilyn's consent. She also never saw a dime of the sales of this Playboy issue, so besides establishing a brand, Hugh Hefner also established him being a royal dick. From 1953 until 2016, a new Playboy was published every month. That's a long time. Between 2017, so the year of Hugh Hefner's passing, and 2018, they started selling them bi-monthly. Between 2019 and 2020, only quarterly, and in 2020, they decided to stop the physical distribution completely and instead focus on their online content. Over these many years, they've established themselves in multiple countries. They also flopped and got banned in many. Nonetheless, that's quite an achievement. Content like this usually looks very different depending on a country's culture. An American brand managing to expand and make a name for itself, even if it didn't always work out, does speak for its business model. They managed to make a pretty clear distinction between Playboy the magazine and Playboy the brand. Even in countries the magazine is banned in, they can still sell their merchandise, making it a very solid and obviously profitable business model. That brings us to why Playboy is not like other boys. Playboy is special. It's not a product, it's a philosophy. One does not consume Playboy, one becomes the Playboy. Enough of this though. Let's start by looking at some covers. And yes, I have indeed looked at every cover from 1953 until today for this part of the video. I will not be putting you through that though. If you are interested, there's a link in the description. The 50s are probably my favorite decade aesthetically because they didn't completely rely on photography to make an intriguing cover. Instead, they used a lot of collage elements. While the subject of their first issue was very strong, the cover itself is not actually the most amazing in my opinion, but it got the deed done. After this great start, they took a weird turn for a while though, and used a lot of collaged rabbits, taking the main focus off the woman and putting it on the Playboy. I always wondered why it was called Playboy and not Playgirl, Playwoman, or Playmate, but that's because it's not about her. Obviously, most magazines of this genre during that time were not going to be about female empowerment. It was pretty much always about women existing to please men. Playboy expanded on that, not actually focusing that much on women, instead giving readers, obviously, what they wanted to see, but even more so what they wanted to hear and who they wanted to be. Using this rabbit allowed them to establish who the Playboy is supposed to be, the main character. However, I assume they realized eventually that a collaged rabbit does not have the same appeal as a beautiful woman, so they did end up retiring him after a while. I appreciate that they kept the collage aesthetic though, because they ended up creating some really intriguing covers, like this red cover. It is immaculate. I really love it, and I would genuinely love seeing more of this today. Not just a Playboy, but I'm talking in general here. It's beautiful. The 60s were also a pretty strong decade, and that is where my magazines are from. I'll be giving you a closer look in just a minute. At this point, they'd really elevated their ideas and obviously production. They also did something which they would continue to do, which is lean into current trends and movements way beyond just fashion and styling. For example, they adapted the psychedelic aesthetic around the Summer of Love, which was in 1967. It was a political and highly aesthetic movement about free love, peace, opposing the Vietnam War, and a ton of drugs. Playboy leaned into that. Obviously, less focused on the political aspect and more so on the free love part, but it shows that Playboy was very much in touch with the real world and what was going on. That is also what makes Playboy stand out from similar publications and makes it a lot more interesting in hindsight. So while I will be mentioning and showing you the other magazines I have, Playboy will be the main focus of this video, because it offers so much insight into the culture and the time, and it actually had cultural impact as well, which I'll get into in a moment. So while we're in the 60s, I will be giving you a side-by-side comparison between the Playboys and the other magazines I own. Right from the start, there is an obvious difference in quality. The Playboys are both very thick, almost 1 centimeter or half an inch. The format is 28 by 21 centimeters or 11.1 by 8.3 inches. This one has 238 pages and weighs about 1 pound. I tried to figure out if editions today are smaller, so I looked on Amazon and the format is the same. However, the one I found weighed only 400 grams, making it 100 grams lighter than my issue, which is a lot. I'm not completely sure why, if it's because my issue is just especially thick, or if they started printing on different paper, or if they did kind of slim it down over the years. I just wanted to mention it and out myself as that weird bitch weighing Playboy magazines on a kitchen scale. What was most interesting to me, however, is the price, which was only 75 cents. That's around $5.90 today, which is extremely cheap for 240 pages in color. The other magazines are all much thinner. First, we have the Bedside Reader from 1964 for a price of $1, which is another reason why the 75 cents for Playboy surprised me so much. Best for Men is from 1965 and was only 35 cents. And lastly, Nugget from 1966, which cost 60 cents. I actually had a few other magazines as well, but they were rather underwhelming, kind of boring to look at, except for one in particular. The images were just oozing hatred for women. That poor woman deserved so much better, so I destroyed the evidence for her. Before I get into the contents and the photos, the thing you're all waiting for, you perverts, I'll start with the covers. Playboy very clearly demonstrates their lack of consistency right here. In one way, it's inevitable because they were obviously using different photographers and everybody has their own vision and that's completely valid. But here you have pure excellence, and next to it you have a 17 magazine prom edition. The others aren't any better though. The covers are really not that strong. Nugget, out of all of them, is the most intriguing and most cohesive. However, none surprised me as positively as this Playboy cover did, and I'm genuinely happy that this is one of the issues I own. When we talk about content, it's easy to dismiss ads. Ads, however, are much more essential than you might think. They are usually strategically placed where there is a high chance of potential buyers seeing them, so you can tell from the ads who the magazine is for, sometimes even better than from the articles themselves. Playboy is printed entirely in color, and the production for a magazine with over 200 pages in color is not cheap. The issue contained 27 articles, of which only 4 were fiction for men, which is comparatively little, as you will see. They had a much wider spectrum of content, such as articles about the high costs of being a congressman, sex, ecstasy, and psychedelic drugs, interviews with a Playboy, and travel features. The ads mirrored that. There are so many full-page advertisements in color, and more surprisingly, after having seen the other magazines, none of them were about adult movies, pictures, or books. These ads went way beyond self-indulgent men's entertainment. They were more like a toolkit, the things you need to become a Playboy. Cigarettes, alcohol, luxury goods like cars, cameras, and projectors. But it went even further, because there are even some ads for products for women, to give to women, as a way to charm them and obviously make them want to sleep with the reader. However, it wasn't the woman being advertised as the product. That's at least slightly better. Judging from everything in this Playboy magazine from '67, it clearly paints the target audience as being either wealthy or at least higher middle class men. Playboy is not meant to be escapism, it's meant to genuinely capture the Playboy reader's interests, and that's why its contents stay mostly in the real world. Probably only somewhat wealthy men would even care about the costs of being a businessman or horse shows, and could afford cologne or pricey alcohol or traveling. This becomes even more obvious when we compare it to the other magazines. The Bedside Reader stood out for being almost entirely fiction for men. It's printed in black and white and has magenta, orange, and teal accent colors, making the production a bit cheaper while still looking quite nice. There is an article on girl giving seduction advice and prostitution in the US, but as you can tell, this is rather one-sided content. The Bedside Reader doesn't contain many ads, just a single column here or there, and one full page at the end, advertising mostly erotic books or ads placed by individuals, promoting their erotic photo bundles, movies, or illustrated booklets. Kind of like an olden day OnlyFans or Patreon where people could buy bundles at different price ranges. I thought that was quite interesting. There's also a book on how to gamble, solidifying my impression that the ads are very much one note. Best for Men was the cheapest, and you can tell. It's printed entirely in black and white and again contains mostly fiction for men with captivating titles such as She Pitched Curves, White Hot Blonde, and Passion Poacher. The articles are about how to beat slot machines and the psychology of the sex teaser. They also included some jokes and cartoons though. So finally something? Nope. They're probably the least funny thing I have ever read in my entire life. Thank you very much for nothing. Notably, Best for Men has no ads at all. On to Nugget, my favorite, despite the name that makes me want to cry. Nugget is printed mostly in black and white, but the photography is in color, which would be considered a strategic use of budget. It definitely has the most ambitious layout out of all the magazines, including Playboy. I'm not saying it's a great layout per se, but they were trying to do something and I appreciate it. You probably don't care that much, but something I noticed in particular is how empty this page is. So great, an empty fucking page, how is that interesting? Well, for you, it's an empty page. For the people paying for the production, it's wasted space. They had to pay for this page even with hardly anything on it. So usually what most would try to do is fill it up and make it worthwhile. Them not doing that shows that they're either kinda dumb and inexperienced, or that they were willing to make a financial sacrifice in the name of style. Nugget also contains fiction for men. That seems to be quite the standard of the time, and maybe today, I'm not sure, let me know down below. To be completely honest though, all magazines had a lot more content in form of articles and stories than I expected. I thought they'd all be pictures, so even if it's just trashy fiction, it's also not just pictures of boobs, making it a lot less primitive than I thought. Many of the ads in Nugget were very similar to those in the Bedside Reader. Ads for erotic books and nudist magazines and photo bundles, which were rather eerie though because their selling point was advertising women with different races or ethnicities. I know race play is still a thing today, but it's such an off-putting concept. There is a slight shift in focus, however. These ads aren't just promoting women's bodies like the meat, fruit, and vegetables on sale at the grocery store that week. They also pitch the idea of self-improvement. They advertise for women's lingerie, obviously with a clear goal in mind. But more interestingly, there are also ads for workout videos, books on how to start your own business, or how to speak like a college graduate. The idea is obviously to become more desirable, therefore getting more women, a charade we still see performed today by so-called womanizers, alpha males, or dating experts. Most of them completely insufferable, but generally speaking, trying to better yourself is not a bad thing. At least I prefer this over advertising for a woman's body like she's a slab of meat, you know? Finally, what you've been waiting for, the photos. Now, as different as these magazines are, especially compared to Playboy, the pictures are the one thing that weren't as different as I'd hoped. I didn't expect much from these other magazines because I did in fact judge the book, or in this case magazine, by its cover. Sadly, Playboy's pictures didn't really impress me much either though, and I'm here to tell you why. First of all, and this is not a bad thing, just surprising, there aren't very many, especially in relation to the total amount of pages. They're printed in color, but are they really more interestingly shot than the others? In my opinion, no. I think I actually prefer Nugget, which has quickly become my favorite out of all of these. So ranking-wise, it's definitely Nugget and Playboy up there, and the rest out the window. Nugget and Playboy both have an almost playful, natural feel to them, similar to European-style photography. More of that coming in video number 2. Especially this series on the boat seems very casual, and these have to be my favorites, because they really set a tone and tell a story. The Playmate pictures, on the other hand, lack pretty much everything in comparison. I should clarify at this point, I am not a photographer, and I didn't open this magazine to bust a nut. I'm looking at it from an aesthetic side of things, so my judgment at the end of the day doesn't matter. But still, this was kind of disappointing. You know, I expected more. I'm not trying to drag any photographer or model, by the way. My criticism is purely of the concept, not about anybody's abilities or anybody's looks. I'm sure they're all wonderful people. The amount of nudity across all magazines were quite similar. The women were shown topless. Sometimes you got a glimpse of a butt, but never the front region. So overall, pretty tame. Of course, this was the 60s. Things were different back then. As someone who had no idea about Playboy though, and had a very negative image of it, the pictures are quite tasteful. I'd even say some of the illustrations in the Bedside Reader are more sexual than the photography in the other magazines. Speaking of illustration, I'd like to direct your attention towards the comics and jokes in here, some of which aren't even just mildly questionable, but unsettling. I actually looked this up, and Girl Scouts are anywhere between 5 and 17. thus making them underage in any way you try to look at it. I mean, I'm not a man, I'm not living in the 60s, but holy shit. Others are misogynistic or racist. Are we surprised? No. Are we disappointed? Men never cease to disappoint me, so no. This is pretty much exactly what I expected. So good job, Playboy, you did what I thought you would. Thank you.
It's RSN.
In conclusion, what do we learn from all of this? These magazines, apart from Playboy, were about escapism. They consisted mostly of fiction and hardly went beyond brainless but dick-full entertainment. They were meant to be consumed, just like the women were meant to be consumed, and we are not talking mindful consumption. What I will say though, and this is not me praising these magazines, is that at least they didn't really pander to any particular socioeconomic status, making them more inclusive. Not less objectifying, but humble, more down to earth, and less pretentious. Because Playboy, on the other hand, was not so relatable. That being said, my issue is from 1967. Since then, they have gradually backed out of that rich boy niche, becoming more inclusive. This brings us to the 70s, one of the most interesting decades for Playboy, but even more so in terms of social justice movements like feminism. There were two major happenings in the 70s I will talk about. The first one being that Playboy was actually the first magazine out of American Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and probably many more to put a black woman on the cover in 1971. Her name was Doreen Stern, and this cover is amazing, beautiful, and iconic. So iconic that it's been referenced at least twice, never quite achieving its original impact though. Playboy had featured black women before in 1965 with Jennifer Jackson and in 1969 with Jean Bell, but having a black woman on the cover had not happened before. Not just in Playboy's history, but in the history of most major publications. I don't want to give Playboy too much credit for this. It was mainly to increase sales and draw in a younger audience. However, Stern being on the cover instead of just a photo spread on the inside was massive. Black women have been denied their femininity and desirability for so long, while on the other hand being grossly over-sexualized. This image is not that though. Sadly, I don't know how the photos on the inside looked, but I would assume or hope they were as tasteful as this. The other significant development was the rise of feminism that was interpreted rather oddly over at the Playboy headquarters. The covers for a while became very explicit. They had never been this lewd before and have never been this lewd since. They went all in during that brief period of time though. For that, I believe there are two reasons. Number one, obviously, to increase sales. Sex sells, and the more you see something, the less sensitive you become to it. Having basically fully dressed women on their cover was not doing enough anymore. Playboy wanted a younger fan base, so they knew they had to cater to the free love mindset that had swept the nation in the late 60s. Number two, feminism. The feminist movement was really gaining traction in the 70s, calling for independence from men, the ability to express oneself as a person and sexually, and not to be objectified, which Playboy obviously continued doing. An attempt to react to this was made, though, by portraying women in an almost vulgar way. I assume this was meant to show, look, women can do this too. They don't need men. And I agree with this sentiment. Still not sold on the execution, though. Apparently, this didn't really go as planned anyway, because soon they stopped and went back to a less extreme portrayal of sexuality. I do find this time period extremely fascinating, however. The 80s, in my opinion, are kind of when things started going to shit. They were very on brand when it came to pop culture and fashion. The covers were very flashy, the models had the big hair, the big silhouettes. They started asking celebrities to be in Playboy like Madonna and LaToya Jackson. Conceptually, however, they were getting weaker and weaker. Think back to the Playboy chair or the Playboy bathing suit, and now this is what you come up with. I'm not rooting for Playboy here, but it does make me sad. You might disagree, but for me, a beautiful subject does not make a beautiful picture. Of course, if the subject is pretty, the photo won't turn out horrible, but it can still be so boring. Give me something, anything, beyond a conventionally attractive person. Style them, pose them, give them a cool setting, change the angle, change the lighting. There's so much you can do. And Playboy does this. Sadly, that continued into the 90s as well. They were all over the place and completely lost focus. These two are quite good. I like the composition and the colors of this one, and this dress almost reaches Playboy bathing suit level. Overall, the quality was so inconsistent though. They tried the classy route, which ended up looking like a Macy's prom dress catalog, while other covers look so trashy. Some of the models are also questionable, to say the least. All in all, I feel like this is when issues that had been building up for the past years, decades, became very apparent. Before, they were catering to a very exclusive group of people, whereas now they were doing the opposite. Playboy lost part of the identity it had built in the 50s and 60s. They were no longer this top-notch, high-quality publication. They became mediocre. This is not unique to Playboy. It's a marketing limbo any company or brand has to master. In marketing, you have a choice between trying to reach as many people as possible, running the risk of watering yourself down, or you try to cater to a smaller niche, which obviously means less people overall, but with a higher chance of customer loyalty. This can also be a question of wanting long-term or short-term success, slowly or quickly building a customer base. I think what happened with Playboy is that they got a bit too comfortable. They had lasted so long and were rightfully confident in their standing, however that made them overlook that they were taking more and more steps towards destroying their legacy, if you want to refer to it as that. After crawling out of the niche they'd built in the beginning, becoming more accessible, they also became like everybody else in the market they're in, that's simultaneously becoming increasingly saturated. I'm also convinced that's the reason they flopped in so many countries. In the beginning of establishing themselves overseas, they'd often continue using American images to test the waters and save costs. Those images were catered to an American audience though, so why would people outside the US care? American top celebrities most likely don't have a similarly obsessed fan base in other countries, especially back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s when online marketing was just not a thing yet. The other parts of the equation are beauty standards and cultural norms, for which I'll provide you with a few examples. Those being Japan, Mexico, and Africa. I am very well aware of the fact that Africa is a continent and not a country. They call themselves Playboy Africa though. I just wanted to clear that up. Playboy has spread its wings quite far and has been, or still is being, published in many countries outside of North America. I've looked at so many of those covers. Sadly, the website I used back in 2016 is no longer working, meaning you'll have to just trust me when I say they are pretty much what you expect when you think of Playboy Siberia or Sweden. The countries I selected allow me to bring up some interesting points, however, so let's begin with Playboy Africa. They are currently doing what many countries did that ultimately failed. I'm not trying to tell you how people from African countries look, But I feel like this is not super representative of the majority of the population, which opens up the discussion around beauty standards that are, to this day, very Eurocentric. There are videos about beauty standards and colorism linked in the description. The short version is, and I hope I'm not missing anything, basically, black women are still often regarded as unattractive, especially dark-skinned black women. Our entire modern world is built on racism, so even within African countries, lighter skin is often preferred. My point is, Playboy Africa is heavily playing into that, and that is why I'm not sure how long it will survive if we continue to make strides towards being less racist. Because essentially, that is what Playboy Africa is doing and being by only using light skinned or white models. But I feel like we're kind of over this, or at least we fucking should be, because it's stupid and people just deserve so much better. Women deserve so much better. Oh my god, I hate it. To provide an example of a country that does much better, at least judging from what I could see browsing the website, is Playboy Mexico. They seem to use mostly, if not all, Latina models, and the pictures are really, really nice. Something I also don't want to leave unmentioned is that Playboy Mexico put the first ever trans model on the Playboy cover in 2020. Now 2020 is really fucking late, so I don't want to pat them on the back too much, but it's really nice to see nonetheless. Only a few years ago, Victoria's Secret made this bullshit statement of trans women not being able to sell the fantasy, and to have a trans woman on a cover of a magazine that does nothing but that, I think is a really great step in the right direction. However, sadly, I do believe so far Playboy Mexico is the only Playboy that has ever done this. But maybe this laid the ground stone, and we will see more of this in the future. I really do hope that we do. On to Japan, where the situation is a little bit unclear and confusing, to be honest, but very, very interesting. Playboy was published in Japan from 1975 until 2009, and for a long time they did what Playboy Africa is currently doing, erasing their own culture. The models on the cover were literally the epitome of Western beauty. They then took it a step further, completely erasing the women from the cover. I haven't really used this term yet, but basically, Playboy is a male lifestyle magazine. Japan's culture and the way it deals with sex and sexuality is obviously very different from Western culture, another much too complex topic to get into right now. But essentially, they're less open about it. So similarly to the beginnings of Playboy US, they put the focus on the Playboy by using the collaged rabbit, and later they abolished that whole idea and began using socially relevant people and celebrities on the cover. I guess this worked surprisingly well because they managed to keep it up for 30 years. However, they didn't really manage to communicate to customers what they were trying to sell, so eventually the readership died out. Interestingly though, they established a weekly Playboy back in 1966, so way before, which is still going strong to this day. I'm not really sure how much say Playboy US had in this, because as I mentioned, the monthly Playboy that ultimately flopped was only introduced in 1975, so 9 years later. I don't know why there were two. Maybe I'll find out more and clarify in a comment down below. As of right now, I don't fucking know. Conceptually, the weeklies are quite close to the original Playboys, but actually catering to a Japanese audience. They use Japanese models and include manga and other content specific to Japanese culture, building a loyal group of readers that know what they can expect. Their target group is not just men, it's Japanese men. You can only widen your target audience so much until you're causing more harm than good. Japan's weekly versus monthly Playboy is proof of that. And that concludes my Playboy International section. There is so much more to be said, but I've had enough, honestly. Google is completely free. So go to town, my friend. Yeehaw. Playboy is a multi-million-dollar empire that has spread its wings, or shadows, over every continent at some point. Why is it then that I claim it's dying? Mostly, I'm just being overly dramatic. However, they have to start making changes because I don't think they're adapting too well. Playboy stopped the physical distribution of their magazine in 2020, in part due to the pandemic we're currently in, but ultimately I think this was a smart move. Shifting content online is inevitable for brands nowadays. Physical media like magazines, newspapers, and even books are not where the demand and therefore the money is anymore. Especially for adult content. Nobody wants a magazine, they go to Pornhub for free. Online spaces bring different challenges though, especially for brands like Playboy that would not necessarily be considered family friendly. Playboy is on social media, so they have to abide those platforms' guidelines. They are also dealing with a lot of competition, and so in 2015, they made the decision to not show models fully nude anymore.
Okay.
The theory goes like this. Users can find nude people anywhere, for free, anytime. However, the quality of those images aren't that great. So we should take high quality pictures of professional models, charge $10 a month, and that will definitely win men over, and I am as surprised as you are, but apparently it works. That being said, in the last 2 to 3 years with OnlyFans and Patreon on the rise, I don't think this will hold up. I already mentioned how Playboy went from an exclusive rich boy club to a rather generic kind of magazine. However, there are some larger societal developments as well that they haven't reacted to, because I don't think they can, really. Adult content as a whole has gone from niche to mainstream, not just Playboy. People will absolutely still lose their mind when they see a boob, while at the same time sexualizing just about anything, but we're slowly moving away from letting brands like Playboy tell us who to find attractive. When you look at Playboy today, just like 50 years ago, you'll find generically beautiful, thin, mostly white women, because those will be the most appealing to the majority of readers. That's not what everybody wants though, and even though we're only slowly moving towards that direction, we are beginning to appreciate bodies of all shapes and sizes. Playboy is still failing to take that into account. And as we've seen from Victoria's Secret, that doesn't end well because we're sick of the bullshit. Especially younger generations. We're fucking tired of it. Fuck off. I believe one of the more relevant aspects is a different one though. That we, women, are tired of the male gaze and being objectified, styled and posed to men's liking. Our success depending on if men approve of us or not. I'll assume that all women in the magazines consented to the images being taken and printed. However, they didn't shape the narrative, they were just the object within it. Today, with platforms like Patreon or OnlyFans, that changed. There's an interesting discussion to be had about independent sex work, and if this doesn't still continue the notion of women existing to pleasure men, I won't have that discussion today. What I will say, and this is my personal opinion, I prefer this. Women choosing how they want to present themselves over men doing it for them. This also allows a much wider range of preferences being catered to, abandoning beauty standards and embracing oneself more, consumer and creator alike. Another aspect which is beneficial to both parties is that there's a more personal connection. Consumers don't only get images and videos, but also a parasocial relationship, in turn making them more loyal to the creator. This can turn unpleasant if followers cross the line. In most cases, however, this is a very solid and quite safe way to do this kind of work. That parasocial relationship is something Playboy can't provide. they're still following the faraway celebrity up here and peasant consumer down here model that we're just not really into anymore. Celebrity worship is maybe not dying, but it's changing. We want to at least feel like we're getting a look behind the facade, like the interactions with people we look up to are eye to eye. And again, I don't think Playboy can adapt to this demand, which leads me to believe their time might be up. That's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something from this and that you enjoyed it. Part 2 will be coming at some point. There will probably be filler videos in between because this took so fucking long. I am so tired. Feel free to leave your thoughts down below, or you can just tell me how great I am. I'd love that too. You are great and lovely and wonderful, and I really hope you're doing well. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.